Hello, welcome to Inside the Birds NFL Week 16 preview show. I'm Geoff Mosher, and down the stretch we come in the NFL season. It is hard to believe, but just 3 weeks left, starting with, it's already started with the Chargers win over the Broncos on Thursday night. But we are coming down the stretch here, and of course, we've got the holidays coming up. We'll have games on Christmas, and then the next thing you know, it'll be New Year's, and bam, we'll be on to the playoffs. And certainly, the NFL is getting what it's wanted from an intrigue standpoint when it added the seventh seed and then made it so that only the number one seed would get a bye in the first week. Because as we sit here today, sometimes there have been occasions when you enter week 16 that at least you get your number one seed is probably decided. You might still be looking at in the past about who's going to get the two seed and still get a first round bye, but the two seed does not get a first round bye anymore. So it makes the race for that number one seed all the more important. So the NFL has to be pretty happy when it looks at the NFC and it sees that with 3 weeks to go, you've got three teams, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Eagles, all at 12-2, and all still with a shot to get the number one seed. And amazingly, one of these teams, and really it's just either the Vikings or the Lions who have to play each other the last week of the season, one of those teams is going to win at least 12 games, if not more, and not be a one seed at all. It's hard to believe. And, depending on how things go, no, actually, the way it goes, one of those teams will have to be the fifth seed because, they're in the same division, of course. So the four seeds are all division winners. So one of the Lions or the Vikings is going to be the fifth seed, and that team could have 14 wins, which is an unbelievable number for a team that's got to go on the road and play in the first round of the playoffs. So we'll see how it goes there. Now, the AFC is probably more decided at the top, but very, very interesting when it comes to the wild card race, which also might already be decided, but you'll have some intrigue. It starts with the number one seed. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs at 13-1 are in the clear driver's seat to get the number one seed. Buffalo had a shot there, especially when they beat Kansas City to own the tiebreaker. Buffalo had a shot at one point, but it looks like when they stubbed their toe against the Rams, it was a couple of weeks ago, even though they scored all those points, it looks like that might have been the loss that does them in. Because while everybody's waiting for Kansas City to lose, everybody's wondering when the Chiefs are going to finally cave to all their injuries or the fact that their offense is not as explosive in the past or they don't look as intimidating as they have in the past. You could say all these things about the Kansas City Chiefs, but at the end of the day, one thing remains the same. They're the only team in the NFL that is 13-1. All right, they have the best record still in the NFL. They have Patrick Mahomes and his three rings. They have Andy Reid. They have Steve Spagnuolo. So they're proving that no matter what you say about them, no matter how many close games they play, and by the way, they finally won a game by more than one possession last week against the Browns, they keep showing you that they're not just going to roll over and die. And there's 3 weeks left, and they're going to have to keep it up because it's really hard to lose a two-game lead with three left. But that's what they would have to do. That's what the Bills are facing right now as the number two seed with 11 wins, looking up at the Chiefs, and they're 13. The Bills have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. The Bills are thinking they can get this done still because all they have to do is be tied with the Chiefs. So they only have to erase a two-game deficit. It doesn't have to be that they have to be one up. They just have to be tied. And the Bills have the Patriots, then the Jets, then the Patriots over the next 3 weeks. I mean, that is about as gift wrap as you can get for the Buffalo Bills to finish with a 14-3 record. That is exactly what you would want if you were the Buffalo Bills. You can't ask for an easier schedule than that. Yes, they are division games, of course, AFC East games, but I don't think they are sweating that. They are, undefeated so far in their division, and the Patriots, Jets, Patriots just feels like a really easy 3-0. But again, they need the Chiefs to go 1-2, which means they need the Chiefs to lose as many games over the next 3 weeks, twice as many games over the next 3 weeks than they've lost to this point. Now, the Chiefs have a difficult schedule. They have to play the Texans this week. They have the Steelers the following week, and they end against the Broncos. That is tough for pretty much any team, but I doubt that the Chiefs are looking at the schedule saying, "Huh, we can't get this done. We might as well give the Bills the number one seed and take our shot here with the number two." Of course not. Absolutely not. They'll be favored to win all of those games. And it is very, very possible that they'll go 3-0 and continue and get the number one seed, like a lot of people expect they will do. And by the way, the Texans game on Sunday is at home. They do have to go on the road for the last 2 weeks at Steelers, at Broncos. So we'll see. It's interesting. I mean, certainly if the Texans win this week, right? If the Texans beat the Chiefs and the Bills get their expected win over the Patriots, then you go into the last 2 weeks and it gets really interesting. If the Chiefs win this week, no matter what the Bills do, if the Chiefs win this week, then it becomes almost nearly impossible for them unless you think that the Chiefs are going to implode down the stretch. So really the number one seed in the AFC is, I don't want to call it completely locked down, but it looks pretty good that it's going to go to the Kansas City Chiefs. Surprise, surprise. And then, of course, we'll see what happens with Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo, at very least, should win 2 out of these last 3, if not all 3. Get to 14 wins and lock up that number 2 seed. All right, as for the wild cards and the divisions, the rest of the divisions, look, I mean, you've got a division-deciding weekend here with the Steelers right now as the number 3 seed at 10-4, and Baltimore as the 5th seed at 9-5. That could easily be flipped. Baltimore lost to the Steelers the first time, so they're going to be motivated to win this game and tie it up. And then if that would be the case, then both teams would be 10-5, and then it's just going to come down to how those teams play over the last 3 weeks of the season. Baltimore has Texans, and they also have the Browns. By the way, the game this week is in Baltimore, so they'll have a little bit of that advantage. And meanwhile, as I said, the Steelers will have to play the Chiefs and then the Bengals. So a little bit easier schedule for the Ravens. If they can beat the Steelers here, they would probably be in control of getting the number 3 seed, and then that would knock the Steelers down most likely to the 5th seed, depending on how things play out. Now, when you look at the wild card race in the AFC, you see Baltimore 9-5, Chargers now 9-6 after their win against the Broncos. The Broncos 9-6 after losing to the Chargers. Very interesting game. First time we've seen the old fair catch free kick since I believe the late 70s. So that just added a little bit of an intrigue for two teams that typically have trouble scoring, although that was a higher scoring game than you might imagine. But it was big for the Chargers. They get at least now, I don't want to say a stranglehold on a wild card, but they're looking pretty good at 9-6. Denver at 9-6. The loser of the AFC North, either Baltimore or Pittsburgh, along with the Chargers and the Broncos, are almost locks to be your 5, 6, 7 in the AFC. The only 3 teams that are still left that can do it are the Colts, who really don't look like they should be a playoff team right now, the Dolphins, who also don't look like they should be a playoff team, and the Bengals, who are 6-8, don't look like they have a playoff defense. Out of all those 3 teams, they have the worst conference record. However, they have Burrow, they have Higgins, they have Chase Brown, they have Jamar Chase. All right, they have Trey Hendrickson on defense. They are playing better football. They need help, clearly. By the way, they've won 2 straight over the Cowboys and the Titans. They need help. They have to go 3-0 starting with the Browns this week, then the Broncos, then the Steelers. Okay. But then they would also need the Broncos to lose at home to the Chiefs in week 18, which means that game has to kind of matter for the Chiefs, which it might. And that's part of the beauty of the redesigned playoffs here. The Chiefs might have be clinging to that lead, one game lead, perhaps, if it's just one game over the Bills, and may need to win that game. So they need a lot of things to happen. They only have an 8% chance. By the way, they would also need the Dolphins and the Colts to lose at least one more game. Now that's realistic. That the Miami could lose. They have the Niners, the Browns, and the Jets, and honestly, Miami's not that great. I mean, that's probably the easiest schedule of the three teams: the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Colts. Miami has the easiest schedule, having to face the Niners, Browns, and Jets. Those are three teams with losing records. But Miami's a team with a losing record too, so you can't rubber stamp them against any of those games, including Sunday's game against the Niners. But if that were to happen, if the Bengals could beat the Browns, Broncos, and Steelers. And I can see that happening only because the Bengals can score a lot of points. They can match you point for point with anyone. They can outscore the Browns, who are offensively defunct and on a new quarterback. They can outscore the Broncos. They can outscore the Steelers. Those are not three prolific offensive teams. And maybe if they can play a little bit of a lick of defense like they've been doing lately, then they can hold those teams under 24 points so they can win the 28-24 style game. I could absolutely see the Bengals winning those three games the way they play offensively if they can just get a little bit of defense. And I can definitely see one of the two things that they need help-wise to happen, which is the Dolphins and the Colts to each lose one more game. Can I see the Broncos losing to the Chiefs in week 18? Yeah, I could, especially if that game matters. So right now, the toughest thing for the Bengals is finishing 3-0. They can do it, and I think it would be fascinating for the league, for the NFL, for people who really like to watch Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase do their thing. I mean, the Bengals are a fun team to watch offensively. They are really, really good. And in any other year, if they had just a slightly better record, you would probably see Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase up for more awards, individual awards, Offensive Player of the Year, MVP, things like that. But, when you're 6-8, you're not going to be up for anything. But that's why these last 3 weeks of all these teams, the Colts, the Dolphins, and the Bengals, if magic is going to happen and they're going to kick a team out of the wild card that's currently in it, probably the Broncos, then the Bengals to me look like the team that could make that happen. So that's pretty exciting. I'll be interested to see it happen. I have no horse in the race here. I don't care. Obviously, I cover the league. I cover the Eagles. Doesn't matter to me. I don't root for a team, but I think that there would be something about the Bengals having this sort of miraculous run over the last 3 weeks to get into the playoffs, have a 7 seed, and then you got to go to Buffalo and play Josh Allen, maybe in the snow or in the cold. You get a nice red hot Bengals team against most likely Buffalo in the first round of the playoffs. Folks, that's a good first round game, especially if the Bengals are roaring like that, winning 3-0 and getting the help to get in to the playoffs. But we'll just have to wait and see how everything develops. I mean, the Bengals could easily lose to the Browns on Sunday and make all of this null and void. But I'm excited for the last 3 weeks. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be good viewership. And this is why, by the way, when they changed the NFL playoff format, why they did the smart thing and make all those week 18 games to TBD as far as start time. They want a lot of these teams playing at the same time, so they don't know that they're already in. They want everybody playing hard. They want everybody playing all their players. The fantasy football playoff people love that too. So it should be a really good finish in both the NFC as far as the number 1 seed and the AFC as far as how the last wild card seeds are going to shake out, and then of course how that AFC North is going to finish. All right, so the 1:00 games. Mentioned that the Texans are in Kansas City. The Chiefs are 3-point favorites. Now, the Chiefs finally got a win by more than one possession last week. They beat the Browns pretty convincingly. Good win for them. They keep rolling. Marquise Brown. It looks like Marquise Brown could come back for the Chiefs. That could be a really significant player for the Chiefs to get back because he's an explosive player and he's a still a young player. He's not up in the years like DeAndre Hopkins. He can make things happen. He can be a guy that when Mahomes escapes the pocket can find Marquise in a scramble drill. I'm not saying Marquise Brown is the second coming of Jerry Rice, and I think they thought that Xavier Worthy was going to be that guy, but sometimes it takes rookies a little bit of time. This guy's not a rookie. Marquise Brown has had 1,000-yard seasons. I don't know how much you should expect him to play because he hasn't played all year and he had a procedure and he's coming back. But can he play 15 snaps? Can he give them on certain third downs or even play action downs early? Can he give them a certain kind of vertical stretch that they could really use? And if he can, especially with the fact that they've gotten Isaiah Pacheco back, if they can, and if they can overcome the issues that they have been having at offensive tackle, and listen to me talk about all their issues when they're 13-1, but if they can overcome these terrible issues at offensive tackle and get that offense rearing to go, and Marquise Brown adds to it, the Chiefs are going to look pretty good. I mean, they already look good, but I think a lot of people are down on them compared to maybe the Bills or what the Lions are, or maybe even the Vikings or Eagles. But I think the Chiefs are going to be pretty tough if Marquise Brown can give them some production. All right, the big game is the Steelers and the Ravens. And look, the Steelers are not the same team without George Pickens. You saw that against the Eagles. They just don't have someone who can make a play when they really need a play. Doesn't look like he's going to play against the Ravens. Without George Pickens, the Steelers' offense is more one-dimensional. It puts too much pressure on Russell Wilson to have to be even better in the passing game with guys like Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin. They're not getting Mike Williams on the field as much as I thought they would. They need Pickens. I'm not saying Pickens is MVP of the league, but you can see how important he is to that offense and how much better the Steelers are with him than without him, especially when they're facing some good teams. So this will be a challenge. They go to Baltimore. Sounds like Baltimore's not going to have Rashad Bateman. They are also a little bit hurting in the pass catcher. I mean, Deontay Johnson trade has been a nightmare and a disaster. I tell you what, when the Ravens make a trade or when the Ravens make a deal, 9 times out of 10, you say this is going to work out for them because they're the Ravens. They are one of the smartest personnel and scouting teams in the NFL year after year after year. And in fact, Bateman is a good example. He wanted out at one point. He was a first-round pick. It wasn't really happening for him, and they held on to him. They did not move him. They didn't let him go. They kept him on the roster and probably convinced him that there would be opportunities. And Bateman's had a good year this year finally, but it sounds like he's not going to be available this game. No Deontay Johnson. So we'll see how they move the change. Mark Andrews has come back, so it's going to have to be Andrews. It's going to have to be Likely. And of course, Zay Flowers is one of the better receivers in the league. So they have plenty to get it done. And look, it's Steelers Ravens. It's going to be a great game. It's going to be cold. So this will be a game worth watching, even without Pickens and Bateman. Giants are at the Falcons. The Falcons are 6.5-point favorites. The Falcons, so they go to Michael Penix. Technically, they bench Kirk Cousins, and they're about to go to Michael Penix, a guy they drafted top 10, which caused a lot of controversy at the time, but now looks like makes a lot of sense. And we'll see how Penix does. But let's be real. The Falcons essentially benched Kirk Cousins last week against the Raiders. Even though they won 15-9. They ran the ball twice as much as they passed the ball. Okay. They were basically hiding Kirk Cousins in a victory, which you can do when you're playing the Raiders. And they could have done it a week longer and probably gotten by against the Giants. But this team isn't built to just hide the quarterback and try to win ugly over bad teams. They believe, even without much of a pass rush, they believe they're a way better team, and they believe that they're a team that can win the NFC South, and they're only one game behind the NFC South. They're one game behind Tampa, and if they're tied, they win the division because they've beaten Tampa twice. So they know they're in it, and they are convinced that with Kirk Cousins running the offense, he's just not doing what they need him to do. He's not confident. He's not running around. I credit Kirk Cousins. He did have a press conference. He addressed it. He said he likes to shoot the elephant in the room, so he's out there to talk to the media. He said he hasn't forgotten how to play football. I get it, and I do think Kirk Cousins will have a job next year, and maybe 2 years removed from the Achilles, he'll be a little bit more confident. He'll be a little tiny bit more agile and mobile in the pocket. It's never been his thing anyway. But maybe he won't have somebody looking over his shoulder wherever he goes next. I don't know, but I understand why the Falcons went to Michael Penix. But I almost kind of think they should have done it the week before to get him warmed up against the Raiders, especially if you were just going to run the ball at a 2-1 clip. You could have gone to Penix the week before if you were going to handicap your quarterback. Anyway, the Giants will be, I believe, starting Tim Boyle. I mean, they've had injuries all over the map. They don't want to win games. They can say they do. The players want to win games, but ownership doesn't want to win games. The coaching staff doesn't want to win. They want that number one pick, and it'll be fascinating to see what quarterback they're going to take. But the Falcons are getting a gift here, and Michael Penix is getting a favorable matchup in his first start. And I imagine they'll lean on the run more, but let's see what Penix can do as a quarterback. I'm excited. I loved the kid. I absolutely loved the kid, and I was one of the few people who thought it was a good idea that they took him in the first round of the draft, even after signing Kirk Cousins. I'm always a fan of having that kind of a backup plan, and I know that he wasn't seen as a blue chip can't miss quarterback prospect, and some people felt the Falcons reached a little bit. I got a feeling that Michael Penix is going to be a pretty good quarterback in the NFL, and I'm excited to see him with a good offensive line that the Falcons have and some pretty good weapons in Drake London, and Ray McLeod's had a good year, and maybe, just maybe, Kyle Pitts will resurface in this offense. Now, he doesn't block well, and they need a blocking tight end because they like to run, so I don't know how much Pitts can resurface, but we will see. All right, the Lions at the Bears. Now, I think everybody is counting out the Lions because they've got a record number of people on injured reserve, and it's seemingly, I mean, the dam you would think just broke in the last week. Losing Aleem McNeil, like the last really good player they had in the front seven, and then losing, of course, David Montgomery, one of the team leaders. We had John DeFilippo on for our Patreon crowd earlier this week. He coached Montgomery in Chicago, said he was one of those guys that he coached that just absolutely loves football. And so the Lions keep soldiering on, losing player after player after player, and then it looks like they finally get their backs broken in that loss last week to the Bills. But I almost think you have to credit them. I mean, they were down fairly big. They were down 35-14. They lost 48-42. All right. They scored 42 points. I know the Bills defense isn't great and the Lions still have a lot of offensive firepower, but it's not like they rolled over and died. And you know what? They could have lost that game anyway, even with a fuller or healthier roster, because the Bills are really, really good too. So I think people are expecting the Lions to go into Chicago and it's an NFC North game, and now they're all banged up and the playing field's a little more level. Nonsense. I don't see that. Lions are 6-point favorites. Wouldn't shock me at all if they won this game by 2 touchdowns. The Bears are a mess, and the Lions, last I checked, still have a great offensive line. Their quarterback's playing great. Jahmyr Gibbs will have to play more snaps, which I think is okay. I think he might become Christian McCaffrey now and, hit you with the run game, hit you with the pass game. They got Laporta. They have Jamison Williams. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They should be able to score 35 points blindfolded against the Bears, who just aren't playing good defense anymore. And you can understand why with all the turnover they've had in their coaching staff and on their roster. So I am not counting out the Lions this week. I'm not counting them out as a potential number 1 seed and Super Bowl champion. I like what Dan Campbell has done. I like what he said about his team. They're not going to cry. They're not going to sit there and whine or say that they don't have their team. Of course, they're going to have to score a ton of points to overcome their defensive deficiencies. But guess what? They can. All right. Browns to the Bengals. Bengals are 7.5-point favorites. Like I said, the Bengals are motivated because they have great offensive talent. They all want to finish the season strong. T. Higgins wants to get paid, and they can still make the playoffs. So as long as they're alive to make the playoffs, I think you're going to see a very motivated Bengals team. And listen, you don't have to be motivated too much when you're the Cincinnati Bengals and you have the interstate rival Cleveland Browns coming to town. Doesn't take a lot of motivation, but I would expect the Bengals to be performing at a very high level offensively. The Browns are going to be starting Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I believe Nick Chubb got hurt again, so it doesn't look very good for the Browns prospects. They need a quarterback, and I think this is sort of chum in the water for the Bengals to come out there, throw the ball around as well as they do, and come out with a win and see what happens. See if they can get all the permutations to fall into place for them to be able to win and maybe make the playoffs. Titans at Colts. Look, the Colts blew it last week. They lost 31-13 to the Broncos. They're 3 games behind a wild card spot with 3 weeks to go. So you can do the math there. The worst part is Anthony Richardson took a major step back. He was having a couple of good games, but less than 50% completion last week against the Broncos defense. That's good. Hasn't been as good as it was earlier in the year, but Richardson just did not show you that he could meet the moment. I mean, 17 of 38, no touchdowns, no touchdown passes. He did have a touchdown run, a 23-yard run, 7 runs for 46 yards, but 45% completion percentage, 2 interceptions, 36.3 passer rating. At this point in the season, you are hoping to see more development. If you're the Colts, certainly you were hoping to see more development from Anthony Richardson. He's still a young prospect. He still has to play a lot of games. He needs more offseason. He needs to be healthy. I don't know how much of his OTAs and training camp this past year were disrupted from, the shoulder injury that he had as a rookie, but this guy really, really needs a lot of development for this Colts team to really, truly be competitive. It looks like the Titans will be starting Mason Rudolph. Titans defense has not been the same, and it's just on to the offseason for the Tennessee Titans. The Rams at the Jets. The Rams are 3.5-point favorites, and if you're the Rams, you got to be really, really proud of yourself so far for what you've been able to accomplish. Remember, this team started off 1-4. All right, 1-4 with injuries on offense everywhere. Kupp, Nakua, the offensive line. I mean, it was looking bad at 1-5 going into the bye. All right. Then they came out with 3 straight wins, had a few setbacks, lost to the Dolphins and the Eagles, but had some really important wins over the Patriots, the Saints. Then they beat the Bills a couple of weeks ago. Then the Niners in a very weird 12-6 game. And now they got Jets, Cardinals, Seahawks. And they've taken control temporarily here of the NFC West. They are 8-6. You got to think 10 wins would get them the NFC West crown. Now, Seattle's also 8-6, and they got to play each other last week of the season. It could come down to that. Seattle has a very difficult schedule because they have to play the Vikings this weekend. All right, so the Rams have it easier. They already have the tiebreaker for the moment, and they have it easier, but they can't slip up. They are an inconsistent team. That is the one thing that worries me about the Rams, is that they can be inconsistent and they have to fly across the country to play against a Jets team that has nothing but turmoil and nothing but, talent all over the map that just hasn't manifested. But they showed you a little life, in their win against the Jaguars in Jacksonville. I mean, it was a huge game for Aaron Rodgers, a huge game for Davante Adams. And, that's the last thing the Rams want is Rodgers and Davante Adams, pretending that this is 5 or 6 years ago and just going crazy, putting up 28 to 35 points against their defense. The Rams don't want that. They want the Jets to lay down easily. I don't know that the Jets will do that. They've played tough in their last few games. Obviously they beat the Jags. They lost by 6 to the Dolphins. They lost by 5 to the Seahawks. They lost by 1 to the Colts. So their history over the last 3 or 4 weeks is to not just lay down and die. So I'm a little worried for the Rams here, who I did pick to win the NFC West going into the year. And I didn't lose faith in them when they were 1-4, but it didn't look great. but I'm a little worried that you fly across the country and you're playing a Jets team that just isn't ready to completely roll over and die. The good thing is that the Seahawks game is at 4 o'clock, so the Rams will feel every bit as compelled as they need to feel to go and win this game and play hard and make sure that they come out with the W. Eagles at Commanders. Eagles are 3.5 point favorites. If the Eagles win this game, you'll really feel confident that they can finish the year 15-2. And that would mean that they finished the year on a 13-game win streak, which is really about as unbelievable and remarkable as you can imagine, especially when this team was 2-2 headed into the bye. I know a lot of people were excited about the Eagles going into the year. They thought the Eagles would definitely shake off the collapse from last year. You add Saquon Barkley. I think there were questions about the defense that everybody had that all of a sudden have been answered that make the Eagles what they were. But I don't know, even the most ardent, diehard Eagles fan that looked at the schedule, even though it wasn't super tough, and said, yeah, I see 15-2 with this team. I mean, you couldn't have predicted how good this defense was going to be. The Commanders are fighting for their lives. They can still get knocked out of a wild card seed if they don't play well here. Whoever loses the NFC West, whether it's the Rams or the Seahawks, could potentially knock the Commanders out of the playoffs. So you know they're going to play hard. It's a division game anyway. It's a home game. And the Commanders are really trying to erase the stench of their last, I don't know, 20, 30 years and show you what they've got. And Jaden Daniels is a guy that they're going to build around, and he's a really good emerging quarterback. He's not great. He can be great. We've been told that he's the hardest worker on the team, which is what you want to hear about your rookie quarterback. They're not a better team than the Eagles, but they do figure out a way to seemingly beat the Eagles once a year. So this will be an interesting game. We'll obviously have it all covered on Inside the Birds pregame show Sunday morning. Cardinals at Panthers. You know, the Panthers should have, I said this last week, they shouldn't have been favored against the Cowboys just because they were at home and just because they had played really good football the last 2 weeks before against the Eagles and the Chiefs. And before that, they had won 2 games in a row against bad teams. They weren't ready to be favored. That surprised me. And they showed it. They lost pretty badly to the Cowboys 30-14. I mean, I know the Cowboys aren't what were supposed to be, and they're still a team that has a better roster right now than the Panthers. So I was a little surprised to see the Panthers be favorited. I almost picked the Cowboys in my 3 picks. I didn't, but we saw that the Panthers are still far from being that kind of team. They can give you a game, but they're not going to do that week after week after week after week. As for the Cardinals, they keep hanging on. They are 1 game behind the Niners and the Rams, but it's going to be an uphill climb for them. It's going to be an uphill climb. They're too inconsistent of a team, and yes, they beat the Patriots 30-17. That 3-game losing streak going in though, Seattle, Minnesota, Seattle, kind of hurt them. They will have a game against the Rams after this week, and depending on what happens with the Rams and the Seahawks, maybe the Cardinals can still get into it. They're just a very weird team. They're very up and down with their offense. Some weeks Kyler Murray looks really good, and he's connecting with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, and then some weeks it's just not there. James Conner has been fantastic, though, and I would be shocked if James Conner does not have a big game for the Cardinals against this Panthers defense. All right, the 4 o'clock games. We talked about the Minnesota Vikings. They are every bit in line to challenge for that number 1 seed, and they're going to be at the Seahawks. And it looks like Geno Smith will be a go for the Seahawks. So obviously the Vikings will have their eyes on the early game between the Lions and the Bears. And if the Lions do slip up, I mean, the Vikings will smell blood in the water. Now, Seattle's got to pick up the pieces. They had a bad loss to the Packers. They really weren't competitive. Here's the weird thing. The Seahawks are 3-5 at home this year. That is a really, really strange record for the Seahawks to have. I mean, they lost to the Giants at home earlier in the year, and the Giants didn't even have Malik Neighbors in that game. So the Seahawks are the whole NFC West is so inconsistent, so up and down. And the way the Vikings are playing, they're just on a rampage. So I look for the Vikings to go in there and know that they need to get the job done. I don't know if the Seahawks will make it easy for them. I still think the Seahawks are a talented team, but the Vikings can beat you in a bunch of different ways. They can beat you with their great defense. They can beat you with an offense that over the last 5 weeks has averaged 25 points a game. Sam Darnold is doing much better, protecting the ball, dispersing the ball, and not just Justin Jefferson, but also to Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. This Vikings team is on a really nice roll. Losing would be a setback, and if they lose because they turn the ball over, you'll hear the but Sam Darnold's again as far as what they can do. But I would expect that the Vikings are going to really come into this game knowing what's at stake and knowing that they can still get the number one seed, and you'll see a good Vikings team. Kevin O'Connell might be the coach of the year, depending on how things finish up. He's already done an unbelievable job. Patriots at Bills. Well, Josh Allen has basically wrapped up the MVP award, I would say, unless he implodes here. And, again, they have Patriots this week, Jets, and then they finish with the Patriots. They really should be 3-0. It would be a shock if they don't get to 3-0. And if they do that, then Josh Allen's going to win the NFL MVP, his first one, and it'll be well-deserved. As far as the Patriots, Jared Mayo, is he definitely going to be back next year as our head coach? He was the heir apparent, the chosen one when Bill Belichick parted ways with the organization. He's got to be competitive, though. Last week, they lost 30-17 against the Cardinals. That doesn't look good. You really need them to be competitive. But I would expect the Bills to roll here. You would like to see the Patriots give them a fight for Jared Mayo's sake. We'll see what happens. 49ers and Dolphins. I mean, both teams have injuries. Both teams are 6-8 and trying to win out to finish above 500. Both of them have offensive line deficiencies, injuries, guys not playing well. And then both teams have their number one receiver not even getting the ball. Deebo Samuel doesn't get the ball. Then when he gets thrown to him, he drops it. So not great for him. Tyreek Hill, for whatever reason this year, has not been a major part of the Dolphins offense. So these are very similar teams, and both trying to finish the season strong, but really both trying to just get to the finish line here without losing any more players and figure out in the offseason how they get back to being in that conversation as a Super Bowl contender, because both of them entered the year as Super Bowl contenders. Sunday night, Bucks at Cowboys. The Cowboys have won 3 or 4. They're a muffed punt away from winning 4 straight. All right. And people laughed at me about 4 weeks ago when I said, hey, look, the Cowboys could be on a 5-game win streak when they go into Philadelphia the week after Christmas. And I'm not going to be right, but winning 3 out of 4, they really should be, or could be 4 out of 4, but they muffed the punt against the Bengals and then gave up the touchdown, and there they lost the game. Now, I don't think that they're going to beat the Bucks. They're home, the Cowboys. They've been terrible at home all year long, and the Bucks are on a mission. They're trying to win the NFC South, and they have a very, very good offense. So I would expect the Bucks offense to be at peak explosion here against the Cowboys. The Cowboys might put up a fight, but the Bucks have a lot to play for, and they've been playing really, really well, even without Chris Godwin, offensively especially. Monday night game, you got the Saints at the Packers. Hey, Packers can't ask for a better scenario here. You got a bad team that plays indoors, coming to Lambeau in late December on a backup quarterback. All right, that's why they're 14.5-point favorites, and the stage is set for a big win for them as they continue to try to see what they can do. I don't think the number one seed is any longer, or winning the division is doable for them, but they want to go into the playoffs and say, hey, we can beat anybody. Watch us play at our best, and we will beat anybody. That's what the Packers want to accomplish over these last 3 weeks going into the playoffs. All right, you got my 3 picks against the spread here. It was a big rebound for me last week. I was 3-0 after I was 0-3 the week before. I had the Broncos covering the 4 against the Colts. They did that easily. I had the Vikings cover the 7 against the Bears, did it easily. And I had the Chiefs covering the 4 against the Browns. So I went 3-0. Overall, I'm 25-20 this week. Here's who I like. And I know it's a big number, but I like the Packers and that 13.5 over the Saints. I like the Packers to cover the big number. I just don't think the Saints will be able to score a whole lot of points. Kamara's probably not going to play, so the Packers got it pretty much a full arsenal, and they're going to roll at home over the Saints. I like the Chiefs to cover the 3 against the Texans. Chiefs finally won a game by more than one possession. This Texans team is very unimpressive. They don't score a lot of points. And unless they're going to hold the Chiefs down in Kansas City, um, which I don't see happening, then you're going to see the Chiefs win another game and more than 3. I think that they can win this game by at least a touchdown, if not bigger, over a Texans team that is just not very impressive this year compared to what people expected of them going into the year. And lastly, I will take the Dolphins at home over the Niners. They're favored by a point. Anybody's game, but I like the Dolphins just because they're the home team. They're, like I said, two very similar teams, both trying to play out strong. Just think the Dolphins will have a little bit more. We'll see. I know they're banged up at receiver as well. It wouldn't shock me if the Niners could come out with a win, but I'm feeling the Dolphins in this one, so I'm taking the Dolphins. That's going to be it for the show for Inside the Birds Week 16 preview. Enjoy your football watching. Talk to you next week.